Hey, welcome back to the show. I was definitely one of those kids back in the day that And Justice for All had a massive impact on. And to me, it was the most metal sounding record. It was just the most metal sound I've ever heard. And it stayed that way for so many years. And it was like the yardstick album that I just rated all other metal albums on. And I had no idea that there was no bass on the album. I had no idea that the mixing was just so different. All I cared was that it was just so intense and just so metal. And that sound was that was just how I judged metal, and that one album really did capture the soundtrack to my teenage youth. And I'm not sure exactly what music I'll be playing without that, but And Justice for All came along and it really changed my world. So for years making this show, I've been capturing tones. I've come back around to And Justice for All, I don't know, many times, but every single time I get loads of questions asking, can I get the tone with a Marshall? Can I get it with an EVH? Can I get it with my Fender Mustang? I don't know, whatever it is. And each time, really until now, I've said, no, you really have to get a boogie. I went out and bought a boogie, painstakingly saved up loads of money just to get a boogie. And I'll tell you the truth, I was a little underwhelmed when I got it. I was expecting a whole lot more from it. It does capture all those sounds that I love, Lamb of God and John Petrucci and Metallica. But after returning from the Metallica concert the other night in Brisbane, I'm still on a cloud after that. It was just such a great concert. I've come back, I feel refreshed, and I've just really taken it on to try and capture this entire sound using a Marshall DSL. I know loads of you out there have one, and it'd be really cool if you can just get fairly close to this tone. And either way, even if you have a boogie, you've still got to go out and get EQs and run all this outboard gear just to try and sound the same. And if you're lucky enough to have the gear like a Mark II C+, the Tone Gods did a masterclass with Flemming Rasmussen, who produced And Justice for All, and they go through the whole process, leaving no stone unturned, have all the gear at their disposal, and the sound is fantastic. And look, I'll have links for that in the description, but for this purpose, I'm not using any of the gear that was on the record itself. We've got the Marshall DSL100, we're on the red channel, lead 1. The gain is not that high, it's only just past 12 o'clock. The volume's at 9 o'clock, we've got the treble just backed off a little bit, mid slightly off. The bass is up actually a little bit higher than I would usually run this. The presence is centered at lunchtime, and there's absolutely zero reverb, but the amp on its own, it actually gives you probably like a Randy Rhoads style tone, but and from that you can tell it's just a fairly generic sort of sound. It's a little bit heavier on the bass. It's been outputted through my 2 Notes Reload 2, where I'm sending 2 mono signals through to my Focusrite Claret interface, into Logic where I've got the Genome software running, and in there I've got 2 Marshall cabs running, one Brit C vintage cab, another Dave Mustaine Megastack with V30s inside. Both have SM57s pushed up to them, and it's just a fairly generic sound. Sounds very similar to what I hear in the room myself. Through the front of the amp we've got absolutely nothing going on. It's just the raw Marshall amp, and that's just going through my Fortin Zool Plus noise gate where I'm using the key and key through feature. That's utilizing the effects loop. So all we've got going here with effects is going through the effects loop. And then we've got the Origin Effects Cali 76 compressor. And there's so much compression on And Justice for All. It really just makes that sort of crackling attack on the top. I'll just... It stands out a lot more when the EQ is engaged, but then we get to the meat and potatoes of this sound, and it really comes down to the Master Effects EQ4H Pro. I've done videos on this in the past, but I never really understood or unlocked the full potential of what this EQ can do. And the fact that you've got 2 mid bands that you can control, and in this case I'm boosting the low mids and I'm just cutting some high mids, and essentially just having a 3 band, you're boosting the bass, you're cutting the mids, and you're pushing a high or just leaving the high fairly natural. It tends to sound like a very hollow sort of sound, but this EQ you can really focus in on every part of that tone and just get like a fat guitar sound that's thick in the mids, but at the same time it's got that scoop sound. You just got to hear this. And there you have it right there. It really is just a tone that The Marshall, it didn't come naturally to this Marshall. A boogie, like using this same setup through a boogie, you'd get so much closer. But it really just brings that Marshall alive with those low mids, just really, and the crunchy attack and scooped highs. And yeah, there's something not 100% about that tone, but it definitely scratches the itch. I guess it's not until you do the full layering and check out the recordings. I've got a section of Injustice for All there. Nothing has changed with all these settings. The compressor's on, the whole bit. It's just 5 tracks, sorry. You can just see it all here right now. So from that, you can see in those 5 tracks that I had 2 pairs panned heavily each way, volume slightly different, and then just the one down the center with the volume backed off. And then you just come in with those different harmonies, and at that point I cancel out a couple of the tracks just to keep things like the volume at the same level. But that's all I did. There was no post-processing or no anything. But it even sounds good when you're just on your own. It's got that big full sound. It's such a dry sound. There's not a lot of gain going on. Hetfield never really had a lot of gain, especially when you lay all those guitars. They don't just sound like this like mushy wall of sound. It's actually quite tight and refined, but on its own it's cool too. I have probably added a little bit too much lower mids just to compensate for the Marshall, as it's got more of that sort of that raw, whereas the Boogie has that sort of mid-focus sort of bite to it, that barky sort of sound. You do have to go over the top a little bit in certain areas just to compensate for that Boogie, but all in all, it's pretty cool tone. Even the guitar solos sound very much the same. And that solo tone really does have that same sort of cutting element that Kirk's has on the album. It's very heavy in those low mids. It It's not too harsh on your ears in the treble, but it's very dry. I think the slightest bit of reverb on that and you just have a perfect solo tone, maybe just like a volume boost if you're doing it in a live sense. And honestly, I think that solo tone that we're on right now, it's actually better than I've ever got out of any of the boogies for this album. It's extremely close. It's closer than the rhythm tone, that's for sure, but I should have learnt more solos. The rhythm tones are still just really cool. I tried replicating the same tone with 2 parametric EQs, even 2 parametric EQs backed up with the MXR 10 band, and I just couldn't do it as well as just the single EQ4H Pro. This is based off the Furman PQ4. It really is just like a direct copy. It's got all the different switching options. It's an absolutely killer EQ. I had no idea that the potential to dial a tone like this was possible, but it really was a labour of love making this video for you guys today, and hopefully we've got close enough that you can just experiment yourselves and see what you can do. The DSL is a fantastic amp, and for the price it's absolutely killer. So look, until next time guys, take care. I'll see you later.